welcome to the third edition of Magical Journey's Paranormal Files, where each week I will bring you a little bit more of some of my findings on the paranormal and some of the research that I've been doing on the paranormal. All of this is becoming updated information, as it was a very long time between the time when I used to do paranormal research and investigation and now. So, before we get started, I am going to do a little bit of housekeeping and tell you guys about exactly where you can find me online. First and foremost, obviously here on YouTube, you can find my channel under Magical Journey. I almost said .com, that's the website. Never mind. Under Magical Journey. And yes, the website, magicaljourney.com. You can find all of my information on the website. Any social media, my email, other ways to contact me. And you can also book a reading with me. I do tarot card and oracle readings. If you would like to do that, please go to the website and check it out. I've been told I'm a pretty good reader. I don't know. I don't like the readings I do on myself, but anyway, that's beside the point. Along with that, we have Facebook group and Facebook pages for, actually we have two Facebook pages now, because I just started one for the Paranormal Journal, or Journal Paranormal Files. We were the Paranormal Journal. I changed to the Paranormal Files because originally that's what I was going to call this, the Paranormal Files. Now, Facebook, you can join my Facebook page or follow that if you just want information on what's going on as far as shows coming up and current shows. That's also the case with the journal, the files. God, it's going to take me forever to get used to calling it what I wanted to call it to start with. Anyway, there's a page for the files. Check it out. Like it if you're interested in just keeping up with the stuff that's going on with that. I will eventually start doing some other updates on there other than just show information to kind of get you guys up to date on some stuff. Actually, one of the things I'm going to post on there this week, I'll talk about in a little bit on this video. It's historical photos dealing with something that we'll discuss in a little bit. So, then there is the Facebook group. The group is a little bit extra. It doesn't cost anything, don't get me wrong, okay? But it is a little extra in the amount of information you get. I will be posting some files in that group from time to time and so forth like that. And you'll get to meet some of the people who are my supporters, friends, and so forth. And we also will have discussions from time to time on paranormal topics and what's going on, of course, with the site, with the channel, which is the most important thing. And yeah, any updates that are coming on that will benefit you to know as a follower of Magical Journey. And of course, there is TikTok, which is my kind of behind the scenes and personal journal, which is also Magical Journey. All of these will be found under Magical Journey, except for the Paranormal Files, I believe is actually found under the Paranormal Files. Anyway, with that said, let's get to today's subject. So, there's a couple of things we're going to talk about here. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about about haunted places and hauntings in the Tennessee area. Some of these are, actually all of these are fairly well known. However, one of the things that I want to talk about and kind of bring to mind is a little bit more about a couple of these that you may or may not know. We'll go into the history of a couple of these, and we'll kind of go over a little bit of um, what you could see in upcoming shows related to some of these hauntings. Uh, so, with that said, the first one that I came across in all of my research was the Reed House in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, I have not done a lot of in depth investigation or research either way on the Reed House. I do know that it is one of those places that is listed in a lot of sites, a lot of information out there on it. And so the research part of that, at least, will hopefully be fairly extensive. Let me just say that as far as like going to actual investigations, location investigations, that is not going to happen for some time due to the fact that I need to find somebody who, at least one other person who wants to go with. So if you're somebody who lives in Tennessee and are interested in doing on-site investigation, then please give me a email or a PM, DM, something to let me know, and we'll talk about it. Um, Preferably for some of these, more than one person, because there's a couple of them, uh, which, like Harriman Hospital, uh, the cost to get in covers up to 6 people, and it would be really nice to have about that many people for something like that because it is multiple locations in one building throughout the night. Uh, the Thompson House Hotel in Red Boiling Springs, Tennessee, is another one, another name that kept coming up. Very interesting. Uh, but then there's some place, and I am considering actually this is doable um, to a point. In I need to find out the what fors and how it goes, how to go about doing it. But the one place that's local that I could definitely see being able to get into fairly easy and do an investigation on my own is Gaylord Operyland Hotel in Nashville. Now, I know that there's at least one or two ghost stories related to the Opryland Hotel, but I believe there's probably more activity than that. Um, the Opryland Hotel, if you remember, went through. Uh, it was part of the flood. Not, I'm not aware that anything happened to anybody during the Great um, Nashville flood back in the 90s, but I do know that the building was destroyed basically. Several, I think the bottom, I said top, the bottom two, maybe 3 floors had severe damage, and it had to be like pretty much you got a brand new facelift. Like the bar that is out in the middle of the water there now, it actually used to spin. Um, it rotated, but during the flood, there was damage to the mechanism, and they just never repaired it, so it stays stationary now. Um, the the landscape of the hotel itself changed drastically with the putting it all back together again. Needless to say, a lot of the plants and so forth that were there before the flood uh, kind of ceased to exist, so they had to do a lot of work to the hotel. But the flood itself really has very little impact, other than the fact that it did change, and there was a lot of work that went on. And as most of you know, if you want to stir the pot in a haunted building, just do some renovation. It really stirs the ghosts up, so to say. So um, that really added to a little bit of the factor of uh, hauntings and sightings for at least a period of time in the hotel. Any ghosts that may have been dormant or not as active definitely showed themselves during that time, probably. Harriman Hospital, that location in particular. So, Harriman, if you are going toward Knoxville, before you reach Oak Ridge, there is a little area off to your right that during the green season where everything is really grown up, you can hardly even tell there's anything there. But this time of year where the leaves start dying and so forth, you can actually see off to the right when you get to the turnoff for Harriman. You can see the Kroger right there. Um, Harriman is a very interesting area. It is part of uh, the area that is kind of affected by the Oak Ridge. Um, Oak Ridge has its own thing going on. We'll talk about it another time. But Harriman is one of those places that has a lot of strange energy. Part of that is from Oak Ridge. Part of that is just from the history of the area. The history is very interesting there, and of course, there's cryptid activity and other things that are there in Harriman. That will be another show for another day. We will just talk about Harriman one day. Um, Another area that gets talked about a lot, as a matter of fact, I had a coworker talk about this week, is Bushy Mountain Pen and Potras, Tennessee. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Um, I mean, it's a penitentiary. It was, and those are by nature just haunted. There's a lot of obvious, intense activity uh, in those places. People get unalived in them. Um, it's just a brutal, brutal environment. And anytime you had that kind of environment, um, hospitals, penitentiaries, asylums, all of that tend to be haunted. Theaters tend to be haunted because there's a lot of intense emotion created in those buildings. So in that, there tends to be this energy and fluctuation that seems to cause hauntings. And while I'm still trying to figure that out myself altogether and still trying to find out all the reasons behind it, which I probably never will in my lifetime, but hey, it's worth a shot, right? I'm always digging deeper to try to find information out, especially when it comes to the nuts and bolts, because paranormal research and investigation and study is kind of like cryptozoology. It's a pseudoscience. It's not really considered a science. So, but with that though, I want to try to find scientific reasons for some of this stuff that could be happening if possible. We'll see. Another area that is like, and this is another thing that to add to the list of places that have a lot of intense energy, and that's battlefields, especially the Civil War battlefields, because that was the only war actually fought on the scale it was fought in this country, other than, of course, the war between the Europeans and the natives of this country. Um, this was an incredibly emotional. event that has just huge swaths of land that actually are immortalized in history. Um, you don't see that as much in with some of the great battles between the Europeans and the indigenous Americans, but you do see, like, most notably, here in Tennessee, Shiloh National Cemetery is one of the ones that is extremely haunted. Um, the interesting part there is two of the meanings for the name Shiloh is gift from God, and there's another one, abundance. And those are very interesting, ironic, for some places haunted as Shiloh Cemetery. And I would like to add, even though Chickamauga is in Georgia, I'm going to add that to the discussion today for just a moment, um, because there is a phenomena there, a cryptid, we believe, in seen in Chickamauga called Old Green Eyes, which is another one of those stories for another day. It's a lot to invest in. Um, Again, an area, even though we're talking about Tennessee today, and this is actually in Georgia, I really want to include that in this little bit of a blurb here, just because Chickamauga battlefield was a very intense area too, like Shiloh. Shiloh, however, though, does have a lot of paranormal stuff going on there apparently, and I keep seeing something moving around over, not here, over here. So I don't know if any of the rest of you see that or not, but I feel I can almost feel it right over here. Um, so one of here's a couple of things I really want to talk about that have pretty good impact on the general area, and they are well known, at least locally, for the stuff that goes on there. Uh, the first one, obviously, the Bell Witch Cave, is known more than locally. As all of you know, the story of um, the Bell Witch is the only, and the Bell Witch is not technically a witch. I'm going to just say that. Uh, I'm not going to get into a lot of that story right now because it's what I have is not completely confirmed yet. Um, but I will say that the Bell Witch Cave is an area that is considered a very haunted area. Bell Witch was the only haunting that's documented that a death occurred as a result of the haunting, according to legend. Uh, I'm going to use according to legend and allegedly, probably a lot in this because nothing in this so far is 100% proven. Okay. I'm going about everything from a very skeptical sense in a way. Um, I want to see something right quick and see if I can do this. Uh, I don't think the thing I really want to do, I can do on here. I wanted to check on that right quick. Never mind. Okay. So with the Bell Witch Cave, One of the things I have found out about that I want to investigate a little bit more is because it kind of goes into something else I'm going to be talking about or doing at another time. I did not know until I started doing some research that the Bell Witch has manifested in more places than just around the original story, which does not surprise me, but it's something that's not talked about very often. And I haven't ever heard it until doing my research. I suspected it. Um, One of the things that I will say that I am toying with the idea of doing is, and I will be doing a interview with the person who I'm about to talk about for a moment coming up. Um, but, and I'm not going to drop a name just yet on that. But one of the people that I'm in contact with right now, uh, who I'm going to be doing an interview with coming up, is known for channeling the Bell Witch, allegedly. I really want to say that because I don't, again, I don't disqualify or disbelieve what he claims, but I don't have any. There's no way to really gauge that as actual proof. Um, Now, once I actually see it in action, maybe I don't need to disprove or prove it one way or the other, right? Um, so right now, allegedly, um, there is somebody who does channel the Bell Witch, and we will be talking about that coming up in another episode. Actually, that will be coming up in not only in the Paranormal Files, but in an interview, a live interview on a coming Friday. Um, like I said, Bell Witch has been reported at least in a couple of other places before that I found in my research. The Bell Witch Cave is in Adams County, in case you did not know that. But then who doesn't know that at this point, right? Um, then there is something that I found very interesting. It does not surprise me because the one or two times I've been inside this building, I was absolutely overwhelmed and almost creeped out um, by the energy, by the just, and creeped out by, I mean, it just had a very foreboding uh, energy, an energy of dominance almost. It was just, it was very oppressive feeling in the building. And I felt very uncomfortable most of the time I was there. And that is the Tennessee State Capitol, where the body of President Polk and his wife were kept. Um, in doing my research, one of the things I've discovered is that the site of the state capitol itself was originally um, where where it stands now was taken over by the Union at one point and fortified, and um, it was used by by the soldiers there to, yeah, in the war itself. So there's a lot of even just talking about it is oppressive. I feel the energy of it in a sense. It's just a lingering feeling from being in there before. I just remember like a feeling of foreboding almost. It was just, I don't even know how to describe it. Very dark, dense energy there. So I'm not really sure what all went on there. But again, another place that I want to do some deep diving on at some point. Possibly, if I can, find out a way to be able to go in and do research there or an investigation there. if I can. I don't know what the, with that being like a government building, I don't know how that works or if you can even do that there. Um, but those are areas that are known to be haunted, and those are areas that I'm going to be focusing on at some point with with doing some research, possibly doing a little bit of investigation at some of them. We'll see. Definitely going to be doing research and finding out what I can find out about things that have happened there in those areas and the significance of those areas. Now, obviously, one of the reasons why um, hauntings occur is because of just the emotional impact that an area suffers because of situations and so forth. But I also know that with the large amount of minerals and so forth in this area, like any other place, there are minerals here and so forth that will facilitate, if you will. Sorry, I got like a sinus thing going on today with the weather and so forth. It's just nasty. Um, the minerals and so forth tend to, I believe, have an effect on the paranormal side of areas from time to time. Um, some of the minerals that are very obvious here in Tennessee, that have either been found and or mined in Tennessee, um, dolomite, fluorite, copper, iron, um, and one that I found very interesting, celestite. I did not know that that was a stone that had been actually found here. And one of the things with celestite, which is important to know, is that it's connected with the celestial. So that's very interesting. And when I talk about it being connected with celestial, I mean, celestite is used um, when trying to connect to celestial beings, um, with meditation, that sort of thing. Iron obviously is a very interesting because you get hematite and so forth from iron. There's other things that go on with iron that I find very interesting. Um, the Fae are not fans of iron, just saying. And neither are some other creatures and celestial or paranormal beings. Copper is very interesting because it is also a conduit. It is a way for energy to travel through things. So it's very interesting that that copper is one of the minerals that is high in this area because obviously energy flows through copper. Copper is underground. There is a lot of potential energy flow going through that copper, which can explain why some places are more prone to paranormal activity than others. Uh, it will be interesting to see which areas have high content, copper content in them, and that's one of the things that I want to kind of dig into. Fluoride, definitely want to dig into fluoride a little bit and celestite and see what areas specifically these are found in high concentration in. Now, one of the things I found very interesting too, the Cumberland Plateau area has a lot of high strangeness energy. I believe there are hauntings there. I can feel it when I'm driving through those areas. It's very like some of the towns that I drive through going in that direction have a very strange feeling to them. There's an energy and almost like a darkness in a sense that hangs over a couple of them. So that's very interesting. But I find it very interesting that natural gas facilities, like there's a lot of places there that that natural gas is created at in the Cumberland Plateau area. I found that very interesting. That can also affect a lot of things, I'm sure, um, with that area because there's a lot of activity that centers around those things, and I'm sure that that has something to do with a lot of high strangeness activity because it is so active over there in the sense of productivity of natural gas. So, and I say that to say this: um, when you're dealing with the paranormal, especially with ghosts and so forth, you're dealing with the human impact on an area. Okay, and human impact is a big thing when it comes to the paranormal. Obviously, anything we do that impacts the earth can affect paranormal phenomena, connect um, it can affect the cryptids, it can affect a lot of things. So our engagement with an area, the human impact, is incredibly important to understand. Every area that we touch, every area that we live in, and that we have any contact in whatsoever, can be an area of paranormal activity. Now, with that said, one of the things that I want to mention is that our impact, our engagement with an area can not only change its energy, but it can change its vibrational level. It can change a lot of things about it. So if you have an area that is highly paranormal, highly, especially ghost activity and so forth like that, the vibrational level of those areas have been changed through human contact. Obviously, you know, if somebody's unalived in an area, uh, it's very possible that it has changed forever the the condition, the vibration of that area, and densed it down quite a bit. Now, I want to talk for a minute about some of the situations that occur that humans have impacted the land in this area and other areas as well, all over the country in a sense, in a very harmful way, and has changed forever the landscape of not only Tennessee but all of the areas that I'm focusing on right now for this part of the journal, the files, the files, the files. It's files, Daniel. Okay. Um, sorry. I'm so easily distracted today because of the congestion and so forth. Let's talk about obviously the natural gas um, productivity in the Cumberland Plateau area has a high impact on the energy of that area. The mining industry, mining a lot of these minerals that we talked about, has had a long lasting effect on certain areas. There was mining in the LBL at one point, the area that we now know as the LBL. Was mined for iron at one point and for hematite. Um, so let's talk about the idea of climate change for starters. That's a new one. That's a new residual impact on the area. For this area in particular, Tennessee, one of the effects of climate change that is becoming more and more prevalent is an increase in precipitation. Okay. And while some places are getting a decrease in precipitation, we are getting an increase in precipitation. So situations like what happened on in East Tennessee and North Carolina with the hurricane, that was obviously, you could say that was impacted by climate change. Maybe I kind of want to deep dive into uh, the the creation of that hurricane and kind of uh, get a little bit more familiar with what happened with that before I go into a whole lot about that whole thing. But definitely higher moisture content, higher rain content uh, can and will affect an area greatly. Will also affect human health and so forth. But the rainfall, the saturation of the ground, will also eventually affect the ecology of the area, and it will affect um, minerals and so forth like that, because obviously anytime you have a greater um, content of H2O, of water saturation in an area, you're going to change everything about the area. And this will be the second major ecology disaster, ecological disaster. That's the word I'm looking for this area. The second, okay. Um, the first major ecological disaster that happened in this area happened around like after 1908, and we'll get into that in a minute. But so the impact on the ecology of the area for with greater rain, like I said, is going to obviously affect things like the mineral content, plants, animals, the human condition. Obviously, humans are going to be, like I said, more susceptible to disease and so forth because of the growth of water content in the area. Plant life will change once again for this area. So, with that, certain certain activities, I feel personally, it's just my personal thought right now that I'm working on a theory. I feel like paranormal activity will increase quite a bit due to a lot of impact by the ecology of the area. Okay. Um, Obviously, as things become more saturated, as um, we have a change in plant life and so forth because of that, we're going to see the cryptids become more active. Uh, One of the reasons for that you know, is their concern, but also because they're going to be environmentally affected with their food supply and so forth. Because as as the water content changes, as plants become change in the area, as the um, the ground begins to change, and we don't have the same fertile soil that we have now because of the water content and so forth. you're going to see an uptick in the change of cryptids, the types of cryptids, um, the amount of cryptid activity in an area, and so forth and so on. So, with that said, this second impact, environmental impact, has had a huge modern day impact on the paranormal in this area. When it comes to ghost activity, obviously, as we become more distressed by the paranormal activity uptick, the ghostly paranormal is being affected by that too, because our vibrational level is changing, our emotional impact on the land is changing. People, the worry and fear, the distress from watching this, and crop failures are going to become more evident with the change in environment. That is definitely, the food factor is going to be involved. People's livelihoods is going to be changed forever because of the environmental impact on the increase in water activity in this area. However, like I said, and I'm going to post some photos on the Facebook page for the Paranormal Files. I got it right. Yes. Showing some historical photos of what I'm about to talk about next. So, at one time, prior to 1908 and up until the 1950s, the entire Appalachia area, all of Appalachia, had a booming supply of trees known as the American chestnut. These trees were massive. These were like the East Coast equivalent of redwoods in some cases. Some of them grew to enormous sizes. And those are the pictures that I'm going to be posting on the Paranormal Files Facebook page, and probably in the group as well, the Magical Journey group, of these trees. Like some of the historical photos, they're ginormous, and you'll see what I mean in comparison to human beings with these trees in those pictures. So these trees were massive. The area was inundated with them. They towered over things. There were thousands of these trees all through Appalachia, and they were a source of wood for building homes. They were a source of food for not only the animals of the area, but for people. A very big source of food. There were a lot of things that these trees produced. They were really good for heating, for burning, for heat in your home, because of the way that they burned and the intensity of the heat that they produced. It was just a lot of things that these trees impacted because of their whole existence. But they were definitely food for the indigenous and later the European Americans, and that was one of the important parts of the change in the ecology. And they were definitely their fruit and their leaves and so forth were a good source of food for animals. So in 1908, one tree brought over from China for the World's Fair, which was a chestnut tree, a Chinese chestnut tree, was infected with a fungus that did not kill the tree because that tree was immune to it. But the American chestnut trees were not immune to this fungus. And as a result of this one tree that was infected, the the American chestnut tree population began to get hard with this fungus, and they begin to die off. These trees begin to dwindle. And by 1950, in most areas, there were no more American chestnut trees by the 1950s. So, what? Sorry. What is the impact of what was known as the worst ecological disaster in the history of the United States? Let me say something about that right quick. Have you noticed that nobody talks about this particular event? Okay. It's not something that's talked a lot about in history as an ecological disaster. But here's some of the impact of losing the chestnut trees on the ecology. First of all, the obvious thing that happened was the amount of shade that was no longer, because these trees were massive and they create a large area of shading. So there was ample sunlight in areas that used to have some pretty good shade. There was that. There was an effect on the ground from losing the leaves that fall and go into the ground. Obviously, trees that did eventually die and they rotted and went into the ground. They changed the chemical nature of the ground around them, and so forth. And this became impactful to the environment because the leaves were no longer there, the bark was no longer there, nothing was there that supplied what this tree supplied to the nutrients of the soil. So your soil content changed. Not only that, but your food content changed greatly because there was now no more tasty leaves for the animals to eat, or the fruit of the tree for the animal to eat, or people to eat. And human beings had to find a new source of wood for their housing and buildings and so forth, and fires and so forth like that. So there was a lot of ecological change. At least 7 species of plants and animals went extinct due to this ecological change. There was a shift in the animals that lived in this area because of this change, because some of their food source, or sometimes in some cases their major food source, went away. So bugs, insects, birds, that sort of thing that relied on these trees, that shifted. Plants that relied on the nutrients from these trees, that shifted. Like I said, there was at least 7 species of plants and animals that became completely extinct due to the impact of losing these trees on the environment. So ecologically, when these trees died off, everything was changed forever in Appalachia. And nothing would ever again be the same. Like I said, obviously the soil content was one of the big ones. The soil content that we have now and the soil content that we had then, very different, very different. This impacted areas all through, like all over Appalachia. So anything in the Appalachian area, um, all the way from Alabama up to, I think there is still a few surviving trees in some parts of Maine. Maybe I'm not sure about that exactly, but I do know that there are some trees that did survive. So there are sparse amounts of American chestnuts still in existence in some parts of the country. It's not completely extinct, but it definitely is one of those things that um, that was it definitely had. I've got people talking right outside my window, which is distracting me, and I hate that. Hopefully, you don't catch it. Um, the impact of the chestnut tree, though, was deeply affected this whole area, forever changing the face of these areas through here. So here's what I want to say about all of this is the human impact on the area and our the way that things happen here, the way that things energy levels of this area, all of the things that go into paranormal experiences, experiences with cryptids, experiences with wildlife, even. I mean, all those things, our human impact greatly changes an area and greatly affects the paranormal phenomena of the area. You know, every time we engage with a place, we potentially change the outcome for anything that's in that area. You know, as Tennessee's population has grown rapidly due to the migration of people from California into this area for land grabs and so forth, you know, we definitely are seeing an uptick in paranormal activity here because of the human impact. Um, you know, our climate is definitely has changed twice and in a significant way over since the 1900s, the early 1900s. So with that, again, is definitely an effect on the paranormal energy of this area. Um, the vibration of those trees, of the chestnut trees, is no longer here. The energy of those trees are no longer here. That affects the energy around the area as well. So all of these things together play in a lot. And this is one of the things that I want you guys to be aware of when you are entering any area of your local state or whatever. Your energy, your vibrational level, your impact, your engagement with that area does affect a lot of the paranormal activity, a lot of the activity period in the area. It affects the animals, it affects the ecology of the plants and so forth. It can affect a lot of things. This is why it's very important when you go into forest and you're going for hikes and so forth, whether it's government land or private land. Um, what you do in those areas are very important. You know, or what you don't do in those areas are very important. So leaving litter, leaving graffiti on rocks, which I see all over the place for some reason, including national forest, like federally owned forest. Why? I don't understand. But with that said, all of these things impact the environment. All of these things impact the energy, the vibration, the paranormal activity of those areas, and not to mention it raises the eyebrows of the cryptids. So, with that said, um, the the amount of activity when you go into a paranormal, like a haunting spot or whatever, that's another thing. The the ghost, the energy, whatever you want to call it, interacts with the human element, the human vibration, the human energy in that area. So you will affect that area with your engagement and your actions. And this is what's happening a lot of times whenever we go into areas like Shiloh Cemetery or the Bell Witch area. The Bell Witch Cave is very regulated. They have, like, you are given appointments and so forth, from my understanding, of when you can go and how long you can be there and so forth within the cave itself. So those are regulated, and the reason is because the human contact, the human engagement with that area does change the environment of that area greatly, and they know this. Um, so I kind of went in a couple of directions tonight with this. First of all, with talking about the ghost of Tennessee and some of the haunted spots in Tennessee, and then our impact on the ecology and the environment of our areas, and some historical changes and recent changes that is affecting the paranormal experience within not only Tennessee, but all the areas surrounding it. So, appreciate you guys tuning in. I will look forward to engaging with you next week on another edition of the Paranormal Files, episode 4. And until then, may your journey always be magical.